My name is Valentina Moretti, and it has been exactly 8 months, 3 days, and some hours I can't even count since I started selling my soul every night at the Crimson Cabaret. Not in the way you're thinking. I dance. Just dance. But when you move under lights that burn like divine judgment, for men whose faces you never see clearly through the haze of Cuban cigars and the false gleam of expensive champagne, you understand that you're selling something far more intimate than your body. You're selling the illusion that they can possess you, even if it's only for 3 minutes and 40 seconds of a French song whose words you don't even understand. The Crimson Cabaret sits in the heart of the old city, in that part where tourists don't venture after sunset and where locals cross the street to avoid it. It's a 3-story Art Deco building that was once glorious in the 1920s, when the Sicilian Mafia still pretended to be just successful businessmen. Now the walls peel in places, but inside, it's pure red velvet and aged gold, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than my entire life, and a stage where girls like me pretend to be something we're not. I wake up every day at 2 in the afternoon in my room at the back of the cabaret. It's small, maybe 3 meters by 4, with a creaking bed, a wardrobe that won't close properly, and a window overlooking the alley where stray cats fight every dawn. Madame Rousseau, the cabaret's owner, a French woman in her late 60s with hair that's definitely not naturally red and a past no one dares ask about, lets me stay here for free. Well, not exactly free. She deducts €200 from my monthly salary. Still, it's better than anything I could afford with what I earn. My routine is mechanical, almost religious in its repetition. I wake up, shower in the tiny stall that alternates between scalding and freezing water without warning, put on whatever clean clothes I can find, and take the number 42 bus across town to the San Marco clinic. It takes an hour and 15 minutes if traffic's good, nearly 2 when it's not. I use that time to not think, to stare out the fogged-up window and let the city pass like a silent film, where I'm just a spectator in other people's lives. The San Marco clinic is where my mother lives now. Lives is a generous term. She exists there, in a 3rd-floor room that smells of disinfectant and something sadder that has no name. Isabella Moretti, 52 years old, hair that used to be as black as mine but now more gray than anything else, brown eyes that used to sparkle when she laughed and now just stare out the window as if waiting for something that will never come. The doctors call it a severe psychotic episode with catatonic tendencies. I call it a broken heart that never healed. It's been 5 years since my father died. Giovanni Moretti, the man who taught me to dance in our old kitchen, who made my mother laugh with terrible jokes, who worked 60 hours a week as an accountant, and still always had time to help me with math homework. They told us it was gambling debts, that he owed money to the wrong people, and those wrong people did what wrong people do. They found his body in the river, 3 shots to the chest, wallet empty, case closed. Just another idiot who bet more than he could afford. My mother never believed that story. She said my father didn't gamble, that he barely bought a lottery ticket. But the police wouldn't listen, and eventually, after months of screaming at walls that didn't answer, searching for justice in a system that didn't care, something inside her just broke. I was 18, in my first year of university, studying literature because I was naive enough to think I could make something beautiful with words. I dropped everything to take care of her. It wasn't even a decision, really. It was just what you do when the only family you have left is falling apart in front of you. Treatment at San Marco costs €8,000 a month. I earn $3,500 dancing 6 nights a week, plus tips when I'm lucky and the men are drunk enough to be generous but not drunk enough to be violent. I do the math every month, sitting on my creaking bed, staring at numbers that never add up. I'm 3 months behind. The clinic's administration has called me 4 times. The last time, the tired-voiced woman from the finance department told me that if I didn't settle the account by the end of the month, they'd have to transfer my mother to the public sector. I know what that means. I've visited those places, hallways that smell of urine and despair, patients strapped to beds, overworked nurses who barely look you in the eye. My mother won't survive there. She's barely surviving where she is. So I dance, every night from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., and with a 15-minute break at midnight that I use to cry in the bathroom where no one can see me. I dance and pretend I don't see the hands reaching out to touch me when I pass too close to the tables, pretend I don't hear the comments, the propositions, the offers of money for things I will never, ever do. Madame Rousseau protects her girls as much as she can. We have security, rules, boundaries. But in the end, we're just pretty flesh in a market where pretty flesh is currency, and everyone knows it. What I didn't know, for all those 8 months, 3 days, and countless hours, was that someone was watching me. Not the way the other men watched, with hungry eyes and intentions you could read from a mile away. This person watched from a place I'd never noticed. A second-floor box that was always reserved, but always seemed empty. The VIP box, the other girls whispered, belonged to the owner. But the owner never came. Except he did. Every night. And I, in my naivety, my exhaustion, my desperation-blinded vision, never realized I was being studied, catalogued, known by someone I'd never seen. Someone who was about to change absolutely everything in my life, in ways I couldn't have imagined in my worst nightmares, or my most secret, impossible dreams. It was a Friday when everything changed. Fridays are always the worst nights at the Crimson. The cabaret fills with businessmen celebrating the end of the week, tourists seeking the city's dark side, and occasionally, very occasionally, bored rich women looking for thrills their husbands can no longer provide. The smoke grows thicker, the music louder, the tips more generous but the hands more insistent. I was in the middle of my second performance of the night, a slow, melancholic song I'd danced to so many times my body moved on autopilot while my mind was somewhere else, probably calculating how much I still owed the clinic, when I felt it. It's hard to explain exactly what I felt. It wasn't like the other stares, the ones you feel on your skin like hot oil, sticky and invasive. This was different. It was as if someone had shone a light directly into my soul and was reading every word written there, every secret, every fear, every hope I'd buried so deep I sometimes forgot they existed. My eyes moved instinctively to the VIP box, the one that was always empty, and for the first time in 8 months, it wasn't empty. There was a man there. I couldn't see his face clearly through the distance and the strategic lighting that kept the box in semi-darkness, but I could see enough. Dark suit, probably black or navy, so dark it looked black, tailored in a way that screamed real money, not the kind of new money that needs to show off, but the old kind that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. He sat completely still, which was unsettling in itself because everyone at the Crimson was always moving, drinking, smoking, talking, laughing too loud. But he just sat, and even from afar, even without seeing his face properly, I knew he was looking at me. Not the stage, not the other dancers, me. I stumbled. It was just a second, half a misstep I recovered from immediately, but it was enough. In 8 months, I had never missed a step. Never. And he had made me miss one just by being there. I finished the performance on what felt like emergency autopilot, my body completing the moves while my mind was completely elsewhere, trying to understand who this man was and why his mere presence had unsettled me in a way none of the other men, with their invasive hands and disgusting comments, ever had. When I left the stage, my hands were shaking. I went straight to the dressing room I shared with 5 other girls, removed the costume that was more suggestion than clothing, put on my robe, and started wiping off the heavy makeup Madame Rousseau insisted we wear. My fingers were still trembling when I heard the knock on the door. 3 precise knocks, not the rushed kind from the other girls or the impatient kind from clients who occasionally got lost and ended up in the back hallways. 3 knocks that somehow sounded like a summons. I opened the door and found Madame Rousseau. She was wearing one of her vintage dresses, this one emerald green with black lace details, and her red hair was pinned in an elaborate updo that had probably taken an hour to create. But it was her face that worried me. Madame Rousseau had an expression I'd never seen before, something between apprehension and excitement, as if she wasn't sure whether she was about to give me good or bad news. "Valentina, darling," she said with that French accent that grew more pronounced when she was nervous. "You have a request." My stomach sank. Request was the polite term we used when a client wanted a private meeting. I had never accepted a request. Never. Madame knew that. Everyone knew that. I danced, and only danced, and I had made that very clear from day one. "Madame," I began, but she raised her hand, stopping me. "It's not that kind of request," she said quickly. "He just wants to talk to you." "In the VIP box." My heart started beating faster. "I don't do private meetings," I repeated, my voice steadier than I felt. Madame stepped closer, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely concerned. "Valentina, listen carefully. This is not a request you can refuse, not from him." "Who is he?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer, already felt that terrible certainty in the pit of my stomach. Madame Rousseau glanced behind her, as if checking no one was listening, then leaned closer. "Alessio Santoro," she whispered, and the name fell between us like a stone in still water, creating ripples I knew would drown me. "The owner of this place, and half the city." She paused, her eyes meeting mine with an intensity that scared me. "He's the boss, Valentina, the boss of the Santoro family, and when a man like him asks to meet you, you go. There's no choice." I had heard the name Santoro before, of course. Everyone in the city had. They were the family, the organization that controlled everything worth controlling. Casinos, ports, construction, and probably a dozen other things people like me were happier not knowing about. They were the kind of people you didn't speak about aloud, the kind of name that made conversations stop when it was mentioned, and apparently, the head of that family had spent the last 8 months watching me dance. My legs didn't want to move as I started walking down the hallway toward the VIP box. Madame had given me 5 minutes to freshen up, which meant swapping my robe for a simple black dress I wore to and from the cabaret, trying to do something with my sweat-damp hair, and applying a bit of lipstick because my lips were so pale I looked sick. Every step down that hallway felt like it was taking me further from any version of safety I'd ever known, and closer to something I couldn't name but felt like pure danger. The guard at the VIP box door was enormous, probably 6'3" of solid muscle, in a suit that barely contained his shoulders, and with an expression that suggested he'd seen and done things that would give me nightmares. He looked me up and down, not in the leering way I was used to, but as if assessing whether I was a threat. He apparently decided I wasn't, because he opened the door without a word. The interior of the VIP box was different from the rest of the Crimson. While the cabaret was all red velvet and gaudy gold, the box was restrained elegance. Black leather sofas, a low dark wood table that was probably mahogany or something equally expensive, soft lighting from strategically placed lamps, and an entire wall of glass overlooking the stage below. And in the center of it all, with his back to me, looking down at the stage where another girl was now dancing, was he. Alessio Santoro turned when the door closed behind me, and for the first time, I saw his face fully. He was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with that kind of Mediterranean beauty that looked carved from marble. Black hair cut short on the sides but longer on top. Eyes that even in the soft light I could see were an unusual storm gray. A jaw that could cut glass, and a small scar crossing his left eyebrow that somehow only added to rather than detracted from his looks. He wore his suit like a second skin, comfortable in a way that only comes from wearing expensive clothes your whole life. Valentina Moretti, he said, and my name in his mouth sounded different, each syllable pronounced with care, as if it were something precious. Finally, his voice was deep, with just a trace of an Italian accent that had probably been softened by years living here but still colored certain words. Sit, please. I'd rather stand, I said, and immediately regretted it because my voice came out shaky, revealing exactly how nervous I was. Alessio Santoro tilted his head slightly, and something that might have been amusement flickered in his eyes. Brave, he said, or foolish. I haven't decided which yet. He gestured to a bottle of wine on the table, something with a label I didn't recognize but that probably cost more than my rent for 3 months. Wine? No, thank you, I replied, keeping my voice as steady as possible. I'd like to know why I'm here. Straight to the point, he observed, pouring wine for himself into a crystal glass that caught the light in an almost hypnotic way. I appreciate that. Most people waste my time with empty conversation, trying to guess what I want to hear. You don't do that. Because I don't know what you want to hear, I said honestly. I don't even know why I'm here. He set the glass back on the table with a precise movement. You're here because I asked, and I asked because 8 months, 3 days, and approximately 6 hours ago, you walked into my cabaret for the first time, stepped onto that stage, and danced like you were trying to escape your own body. The fact that he knew exactly how long I'd been working there, down to the hours, sent something icy sliding down my spine. You watched me, I said. It wasn't a question. Every night he confirmed without a trace of shame or apology, from this box. Watching you dance, watching you interact with the clients, watching the way you disappear backstage between performances and come back with red eyes but your makeup perfectly retouched. Watching everything. That's, I began, searching for the right word. Disturbing. He smiled, and it was a genuine smile that completely transformed his face, making him look years younger and infinitely more dangerous. Yes, he agreed. I suppose it is, but necessary. Why? I demanded, finding courage in my indignation. Why would you need to watch me? I'm nobody. Just another girl dancing to pay bills. You are Valentina Moretti, he said, and the way he said my name again, with that careful precision, made something strange happen in my chest. 23 years old, daughter of Giovanni and Isabella Moretti. You dropped out of university in your first year when your mother fell ill. You work here 6 nights a week. You visit your mother at the San Marco Clinic every Wednesday at 3 p.m., without fail, no matter how tired you are. Each fact he recited was like a slap, the realization that this man knew more about my life than most people I actually knew. How do you know all this? I whispered. Because I make it a point to know everything about the people who work for me, he answered simply. And because when something or someone captures my attention, I don't rest until I fully understand what I'm looking at. I don't work for you, I said. I work for Madame Rousseau. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. Valentina, who do you think owns the Crimson Cabaret? Who do you think pays Madame Rousseau's salary? Who do you think signs indirectly your paycheck every month? The realization hit me like cold water. I had been so naive. Of course the cabaret belonged to someone like him. Places like the Crimson didn't exist without protection, without connections, without belonging to someone with real power. You, I said unnecessarily. Me? He confirmed. Which means technically, you already work for me. But I'd like to change the nature of that arrangement. He stood, and I instinctively took a step back, which brought that almost smile back to his face. I'm not going to hurt you, Valentina. If I wanted to do that, I would have done it long ago. That wasn't as comforting as he probably intended it to be. He walked to the glass wall, looking down at the stage below where the next girl was starting her performance. You know how much your mother's treatment costs at San Marco, he said. It wasn't a question. 8,000 euros a month. You earn 3,500 here, plus tips that range from 500 to 1,000 euros depending on the night. Which means you're perpetually in debt, perpetually behind, perpetually 1 month away from seeing your mother transferred to a public facility where she won't receive even a fraction of the care she needs. Stop, I said, my voice breaking. Please stop. He turned to face me. You're 3 months behind, 24,000 euros. The clinic will transfer your mother at the end of this month if you don't pay. Tears burned my eyes, but I blinked furiously, refusing to cry in front of this man who somehow knew every humiliating detail of my life. I know, I said. I'm working on it. Working on it how? He asked, and there was something almost gentle in his voice now. Taking more shifts? You already work 6 nights a week? Accepting private requests? We both know you'd never do that. So how, Valentina? How exactly do you plan to come up with 24,000 euros in 2 weeks? I don't know, I admitted, and a tear escaped despite my best efforts, sliding down my cheek. I don't know, okay? I don't know how I'm going to do this. I just know I have to, because she's my mother, and she has no one else, and I can't let her go to one of those places where they treat people like they're just numbers, just problems to be managed. My voice was rising, getting hysterical, and I couldn't stop. She's already lost everything. Lost my father, lost our home, lost her mind. I'm not going to let her lose the only chance she has to get better. Alessio Santoro watched me have my breakdown with an expression I couldn't read. Then he went back to the table, opened a drawer I hadn't noticed, and pulled out a thick envelope. He placed it on the table between us. 24,000 euros, he said calmly, plus 12 months of treatment prepaid. 96,000 euros in total. Enough to ensure your mother receives the best care available for the next year, without you having to worry about a single bill. I stared at the envelope like it was a snake about to strike. What do you want? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Because men like you don't give away that kind of money without wanting something in return. Smart, he said with approval. You're right. I do want something. I want you. My stomach churned. I told you I don't do, I started, but he raised his hand, stopping me. Not in that way, he said, and there was something almost offended in his tone. If I wanted a prostitute, Valentina, there are hundreds of women in this city who would accept willingly and charge far less than 96,000 euros. It's not your body I want. It's your loyalty, your intelligence, your presence. I don't understand, I said honestly. He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that seemed surprisingly human, coming from someone who until now had seemed more like a force of nature than a real person. I need someone I can trust, he said. Someone who isn't already entangled in the web of my organization. Someone without pre-existing loyalties or hidden agendas. Someone I can train, shape, turn into my eyes and ears in places I can't be. He looked at me directly. Someone like you. You want me to be what? I asked, my mind racing. A spy? An informant? I want you to be mine, he said simply. My assistant, my companion at social events, my representative when needed. I want you to learn my world, understand how it works, and eventually become indispensable to it, and to me. And if I say no, I asked, though I already knew the answer. He glanced at the envelope on the table. Then you walk out of here with nothing. You keep dancing 6 nights a week. You keep failing to pay your mother's bills. And in 2 weeks, you watch her get transferred to a public facility where the chances of recovery are, to be generous, minimal. He paused. Or you say yes, take this money, secure your mother's care, and step into a world that, yes, is dangerous, but where you'll have protection, resources, and the chance to become something more than a desperate dancer in a second-rate cabaret. This isn't a choice, I said bitterly. It's an ultimatum. He tilted his head, conceding the point. Perhaps, but it's the only one you have. He pushed the envelope closer to me. 24 hours, Valentina. You have 24 hours to decide. But know this. He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his warmth, smell his cologne that was something expensive and subtle, see the faint lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more than his reputation would suggest. Once you enter my world, there's no easy way out. You'll be mine, in every way that matters, except physically, unless you choose otherwise. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understand that you're buying me, I said, finding one last spark of defiance. I'm saving you, he corrected softly. There's a difference. Take the envelope. Think about it. And tomorrow night at 8, a car will come for you. If you get in, we have a deal. If you don't, we never see each other again, and you can continue your life as if this conversation never happened. Except we both know you'll get in that car, Valentina, because you love your mother more than you value your own freedom. And because I think a part of you is curious about what you could become in my world. He was right, and we both knew it. I took the envelope with trembling hands, feeling its weight, the weight of all the choices I was about to make. Until tomorrow, Alessio Santoro said, and it was both a farewell and a promise. I left that box in a trance, descending the stairs, passing Madame Rousseau, who looked at me with something that might have been pity or envy, and returning to my tiny room. I sat on my creaking bed and opened the envelope. The money was there, exactly as he said, in crisp, new bills. And beneath the money, a card with an address and a line. Your mother will be transferred to the Bella Vista Clinic tomorrow morning. The best specialists in Europe. Your choice has already been made, Valentina. Now you just need to accept it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my bed, the envelope of money beside me, staring at the cracked ceiling of my room and trying to understand how my life had changed so completely in a matter of hours. At 6 a.m., I gave up on trying to sleep, showered, put on my best clothes, which were still woefully inadequate for any world Alessio Santoro inhabited, and took the first bus to the San Marco Clinic. I needed to see my mother. I needed to look into her empty eyes and remind myself why I was about to do what I was about to do. When I arrived at the clinic, there was a commotion on the 3rd floor. Nurses running back and forth, Dr. Mendez, my mother's head psychiatrist, speaking quickly on the phone, and a team of paramedics with a stretcher waiting in the hallway. My heart nearly stopped. Something had happened to my mother. Something terrible. I ran down the hallway, my bag banging against my hip, braced for the worst. But when I reached her room, my mother was sitting on the edge of the bed, dressed with a small suitcase beside her that I didn't know she had, and for the first time in months, she was looking directly at me, really seeing me. Valentina, she said, and her voice was weak but clear, clearer than it had been in a long time. They say I'm being transferred to a better place. Did you do this? I did, I said, kneeling in front of her and taking her hands, which were so thin now, so fragile. You're going to get the best treatment, Mom. The best doctors. Everything's going to be okay. How? She asked, and there was something in her eyes, a glimpse of the woman she used to be, the woman who always knew when I was hiding something. How did you manage this, Valentina? We don't have that kind of money. I got help, I said carefully, from someone who wants to help me. Nothing comes for free, my mother said, and her hands tightened on mine with surprising strength, especially not something like this. What did you promise in return? My time, I said, which was true, just not the whole truth. My work, nothing you need to worry about. She studied me for a long moment, and I could see the struggle happening behind her eyes, the part of her still lost in the fog of mental illness fighting with the part trying to claw its way back to the surface. Be careful, she finally said. Your father? He tried to make a deal once, with people who make those kinds of deals. And look where it got him. The mention of my father was like a punch to the gut. But before I could respond, Dr. Mendez entered the room with a clipboard and a professional smile. Ms. Moretti, he said, extending his hand. I have good news. Your mother has been accepted at the Bella Vista Clinic. It's an extraordinary facility, truly first class. She'll receive care that frankly is beyond what we can offer here. I didn't apply for any transfer, I said, even though I knew it was pointless. Alessio Santoro had said he'd take care of it, and apparently he had. No, an anonymous benefactor made the arrangements, Dr. Mendez explained. Everything has been approved and paid for. The ambulance is waiting to transport your mother now. You can follow in your own vehicle, or there's room for you in the ambulance if you prefer. I rode in the ambulance, sitting beside my mother's stretcher, holding her hand as we crossed the city toward a neighborhood I'd only seen in magazines. The Bella Vista Clinic was on a private estate surrounded by gardens that looked like they'd stepped out of a fairy tale, with fountains and sculptures and stone paths winding through flowers that probably cost more to maintain than most people earned in a year. The building itself looked more like a luxury hotel than a hospital, all glass and light stone, with private balconies and what appeared to be a spa on the ground floor. An entire team greeted us at the entrance. Not just nurses, but what seemed to be a head doctor, a social worker, and even someone who introduced herself as my mother's personal care coordinator. They talked about individualized treatment plans, experimental therapies, staff-to-patient ratios that were nearly 1-to-1, and amenities that included art classes, music therapy, and therapeutic gardens. My mother was taken to what they called a suite, not a room, on the second floor, and when I saw it, I nearly cried. It was larger than my entire room at the Crimson, with a real bed, not a hospital bed, comfortable furniture, a large flat-screen TV, and French doors that opened onto a private balcony overlooking the gardens. "Ms. Moretti," the care coordinator said, touching my arm gently, "there are some papers we need you to sign. Formalities, mostly. And someone left this for you." She handed me an envelope, smaller than the one from last night, but equally heavy with implication. I opened it with fingers that already knew how to tremble in the presence of Alessio Santoro's envelopes. Inside was a key card, an address, and a note in precise masculine handwriting. "Your apartment. Your things have already been moved. The car will come for you at 8 as promised. Dress appropriately. There are clothes in the closet." A.S. appropriately for what? I wondered. But I already knew the answer. Appropriately for his world. For dinners at restaurants where I couldn't afford even an appetizer. For events where people wore jewelry that cost more than cars. For being seen at the side of a man who commanded an empire built on things I was probably happier not knowing about. I spent the rest of the day with my mother, watching her be examined by doctors who genuinely seemed to care, who asked detailed questions and took extensive notes and spoke to her like she was a person, not just a diagnosis. And slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice it happening, I saw something change in her eyes, the fog beginning to lift. The person she used to be starting to fight her way back to the surface.